thank you everyone for joining us. I'm Linda Levan, and I'm the Executive Director of Southern Lit Alliance. Before we get started, I am going to share my screen and I have a little bit of a slideshow here just to tell you more about Southern Lit Alliance and what we do. If you're not familiar with us, this may be your first time. So Southern Lit Alliance has been around since 1952, and we are really working with lots of different programs that I want to share with you. First, I want to thank our presenting sponsor for this Southbound Author Lecture Series we do, Henderson Hutchison McCullough Accountants. They're busy right now in tax season, but we really appreciate their help. Also, we are funded agencies of ArtsBuild and the Tennessee Arts Commission, so you can also thank them for helping us provide all these programs. So our mission is to provide engaging literary arts experiences to encourage passionate readers and writers of all ages. Our programs span from elementary school, kindergarten, all the way through seniors. And we have a variety of different programs. These are a few. So I'll tell you a little more about some of the ones that we're most known for. First is our Southward Literary Festival. This is a festival we have been doing every other year until COVID hit. And it is done with the Fellowship of Southern Writers. It's an honorary organization. Members are elected. And there are about 50 members, so we bring them in once they're able to come, have panel discussions on different topics related to literature. They do some readings, we have book signings, we even have some music, and give people lots of opportunity to interact with them the few days we have that. So while we plan to host it in spring of 21, we are putting it off. We will have sort of a hybrid virtual version this fall, hopefully. And then we hope to bring everyone again next April. Feeling like we're going to be ready to do that and excited. One of the things that's going on right now is our Young Southern Student Writers Contest. So about 4,000 kids enter poetry or prose entries, and it's for kindergarten through 12th grade. The professors at UTC English department read every single one, and about 400 kids are selected for special merit, and we have awards for them. Usually we do a ceremony at the Tivoli where we put a medal around their neck and really make it special. Some of these kids are not really ones to have gotten awards in athletic ventures. So it's just so uplifting for them to be able to have a medal put around their neck and be acknowledged for their work. So we have those that will be getting medals out here shortly. Also, a little more about our Southbound Author Lecture Series. We do these every month, every other month, about 6 times a year, more here since we're doing them virtually. And it has included, here's Lee Smith, Jill McCorkle, we've had Jeffrey Blunt, just all kinds of authors with their first books, as well as some really experienced authors that have put new ones out. Most of our authors are talking about new books that they have done, which makes it really fun to hear what good books are coming out. So one of the ways we're able to do this is donors, and some of you donated when you made your registration, and we really want to thank you for that. We could not do all the things we do with people in Chattanooga and encouraging them to read and write without your help. So here's a little bit about the impact of your donation. The Turn the Page program I'll mention as we're gearing that back up now. We send in facilitators to work with groups in area jails and transitional housing, and they do some creative writing, some journaling, poetry reading, and it really helps them learn to express themselves through writing and reading and discuss it. It's just been very uplifting for them and great help. Also, we have a Yahoo Festival, which is for young adult genre, and we will be having that actually live in September at Chattanooga State. So thank you all for your support, and we will get over here now to our author we have tonight. Stop sharing here. So we are excited to have Marie Bostwick this evening. Thanks, Marie, for joining us.
Well, thanks for inviting me. And what a great organization you've got. It's just, it's so exciting to see, especially, that you're encouraging and supporting young people as they're starting to write. So that's wonderful.
So let me tell everybody a little bit about you. You live in Central Oregon, so it was a little earlier for you there. Been very busy writer, having over 19 historical and contemporary fiction. You're really known for Cobbled Court Quilt series, which has been very popular, and your Christmas novellas that have been on the New York Times bestsellers. Also noted as The Second Sister, which has been made into a movie for Hallmark. Is that correct?
It was a Hallmark Hall of Fame production. Yes.
Yes. Well, you got a good one when it's on the Hallmark Channel and it's uplifting. So we're glad to have you. This new book, The Restoration of Celia Fairchild, is definitely uplifting. And I saw that you have started a blog really with the mission to help women fulfill their lives and find meaning. You want to share a little bit about that blog as well?
Well, I started a blog a few years back, and I originally called it Fiercely Marie, or excuse me, I originally called it Fierce Beyond 50, because I got to a certain point in my life, and suddenly it was like you were over 50, and people were said, "Okay, well, enough now, get off the stage." And I thought, yeah, I just got here. And in fact, I know more now and I have more to share than I've ever had in my life. So I don't think I will. And so I started this blog with an idea that it would be, empowering women in this second half of their lives and encouraging them to really enjoy that and make the most of it. But the funniest thing happened. I found that a lot of the people that were coming were under 50. So I realized that fierceness is something that it is not bound by age. So I moved it to my author website, mariebostwick.com. It's now called Fiercely Marie, and my motto is to help people, pretty much women, live every minute and love every moment. So it's a lifestyle blog, and a lot of it's about the things I'm doing in my life that I love. It's about relationships and travel and cooking, a lot of cooking. I'm a passionate home cook. Crafting, reading, all the things I love that I just share with the world. And it's actually grown beyond my wildest expectations. It was something I did for me, but it turns out that the things I love are something that many thousands of other people are also interested in.
Yeah. Well, I'll give a shout out to women who are fiercely involved in things. The Signal Mountain Country Club Book Club is on here. It's actually Dr. Smith on the screen, but we got about 20 ladies there who joined us. So just a shout out to them. But we wanted to talk tonight about the renovation of Celia Fairchild. So what we'd love for you to do is talk to us about your book and maybe share some readings. And then we'll have some time for questions. And I've got several. I enjoyed the book.
Yep. So the restoration of Celia Fairchild.
I'm sorry, restoration.
It's okay. It's understandable.
She renovated. So
yeah, she did. But it was the restoration of Celia Fairchild. So Celia Fairchild is a syndicated advice columnist known as Dear Calpurnia. And that, to some degree, is sort of where this all started with me. I don't know about you, but I love advice columns. I think they're so just so interesting. And I was thinking about, like, why do I love reading them so much? And I realized, like, no matter how much of a train wreck I may feel my life is, I read an advice column and, well, at least it's not as much of a train wreck as that guy over there, right? So there's a certain level of that into it, but I'm also fascinated by advice columnists. They seem to be the people with all the answers. And of course, that is their job. But the novelist in me could not help but wonder, are they really? Does anybody really have all the answers? Well, Celia is such an interesting character from that standpoint. And, I think the best way to sort of introduce is to do a little short reading, because I imagine that most people haven't heard my work before. And I think it's the best way to start. And I'm just going to do chapter 1. It's rather short, so just stick with me for a minute and we'll introduce you to Celia. Chapter 1. The stage lights were blinding, not in a metaphorical way. When the MC introduced me and the audience began applauding, I exited from the wings, teeth bared in what was meant to be a smile, but felt more like a grimace, squinting and blinking like a groundhog emerging from hibernation. I couldn't see a thing, including the black electrical cord that snaked from the front of the stage to the podium. When I tripped and tumbled forward, I flailed frantically like a cat who'd misjudged the distance from the balcony to the ground. If the quick-thinking MC hadn't caught me under the arms, I'd have ended up doing a face plant in front of 700 people who'd paid $60 a head to eat chicken marsala and hear me talk. Well, they didn't come to hear me. They came to hear Calpurnia, which isn't quite the same thing. Against my better judgment, I'd worn a pair of 5-inch heels to the fundraiser, hoping to stave off the inevitable comments of, somehow I thought you'd be taller, that always followed my fan meet and greets during my infrequent personal appearances. As many times as it's happened, I still never know what to say to that. I mean, what can you say? Sorry to disappoint you. I'll try harder. I drank coffee as a child and it stunted my growth. I stand 5'4" in my bare feet, not tall, but not short either. In fact, it is the average height for American women. But that's not enough for Calpurnia's readers. They expect her to be above average in every way. And that, well as the fact that I'm not really that famous and therefore not that deeply in demand, is why I almost never make personal appearances. After meeting me, people are bound to leave disappointed. But how can you say no to a really good but sorely underfunded after-school program serving at-risk kids of single parents? Well, you can't. Besides, my therapist said it was time for me to get out there again, and she was probably right. So I squeezed into my only pair of Spanx and the glittery red evening dress that wasn't quite so tight only a few weeks ago, strapped on a pair of stupidly tall stilettos, and got out there. Somewhere between tripping and tumbling, one of the heels broke off. After the MC set me back on my feet, I hobbled toward the podium like Quasimodo. A murmur of laughter rippled through the crowd. When my prayer for the floor to open and swallow me up went unanswered, I did what Calpurnia would have done. I brazened it out. Gripping both sides of the podium, I leaned forward so my mouth hovered just in front of the microphone and drawled, well, what can I say? I always did love making an entrance. The crowd laughed again, but this time they laughed with me instead of at me. I smiled. Guess I don't need these anymore, do I? I reached down, slipped off one shoe, then the next, and tossed them to a 50-something man in the front row who, thanks to the sparkly green vest he wore under his tux, was the only person I could actually see. Here you go, sugar. They're just your size. The crowd went crazy, howling with laughter and applauding for at least a full minute. Honestly, I think that a lot of them thought that I'd planned the whole thing, that this was just part of the show. And I guess it was, in a way. But that's why I hate these things, because it's all a show. That's also why, only sometimes and only a little bit, I kind of hate my fans too. Because they aren't really mine, are they? They don't want me, they want the show. They want Calpurnia. After I'd made brief remarks about the important mission of the program and how the money raised today would impact the lives of kids all over the city, somebody finally lowered the stage lights so I could see the audience and take questions. The man in the sparkly vest, still clutching my broken stiletto, was first to the microphone. This is really more of a comment than a question, he said, but I'm a big fan. I feel like I know you, and I wanted to say, well, I just love you. See what I mean? I mean, how can he love me? He doesn't even know me. And I've had enough of that. Sorry, deep breath. Look, I get it that we are dealing with hyperbole here, and that love is maybe the most overused word in the English language, the second most overused being hate. Sparkly Vest Man doesn't love me. He likes me. More accurately, he likes what I write. It's a compliment. I get it. Sparkly Vest Man doesn't love me, and I don't hate him, but I do find him irritating, more now than I would have even a few months ago. It only took $5,000 and 4 months of counseling with a slightly cruel therapist for me to understand that the reason I keep getting my heart broken is that I am desperate, too desperate to regain what was taken from me so many years ago. And desperation will make you do dumb things like ignoring red flags and the warnings of two frank friends. But none of that was Sparkly Vest Man's fault, so I smiled and said the only thing I could say. Well, I love you too, sugar. And then I took the next question and the next and the next. They asked me about finances and fiancés, former wives, wished for careers, and thwarted dreams. But really, they were all looking for the same thing, hope and a way forward. As they came up to the microphone to tell their stories, irritation gave way to tenderness and then to admiration. Their vulnerability was touching, and as I thought about it, really kind of brave. If I were as brave as they were, maybe I lifted up my hand, stopped them mid-sentence, and told them what a mess my life is, what a mess I am. But I am not that brave. And even if I were, how does knowing that help them? I did my best. I listened to what they were saying and what they weren't, and tried to be the Calpurnia that they were counting on, pointing them in the right direction. It is crazy that talking should be so exhausting, but it is. I was grateful when the MC said we'd run out of time. The audience started to applaud once more. I smiled and waved and walked off into the wings in my bare feet, the hem of my glittery red evening dress dragging behind me, carving a dusty trail onto the black stage floor. Backstage, the executive director of the program found me a pair of flip-flops, those thin, flimsy kind you wear for pedicures, then put me into a cab for the ride back to my apartment. The driver was kind of chatty, but I deflected his questions and closed my eyes, making it clear I wasn't up for conversation. The only thing I wanted to do was get home, take off the glittery gown with the dirty hem, extricate myself from the boa constrictor death grip of the Spanx, and go to bed. I was tired, so tired that I actually thought about letting the call go to voicemail. But no matter how hard I try, even when the screen says number unknown or possible spam, I cannot ignore a ringing telephone. There's this part of me that always thinks, or maybe just hopes, it'll be good news or bad. Either way, I cannot stop myself from wanting to know. Months would pass before the verdict was in on good versus bad. But from the moment I answered that call and a voice said, "Miss Fairchild, this is Ann Dowling. I'm an adoption attorney," my life would never be the same. So that is how Celia's story starts off. As you see, Celia wants a family more than anything else. And that is part of what led her to the marriage that did not work out. Celia has incredible insights into other people's problems and none at all into her own. And I feel like this is kind of not only funny, but in fact, the human condition. I think most of us can recognize this in ourselves. I am so good at giving advice to other people. I'm not so good at giving advice to myself or to following my advice when I do manage to give it. And so, Celia, against her better judgment, against all these red flags, went into a marriage. It lasted 3 years. Her husband had 5 affairs in that time, the first with the justice of the peace who married them. So yeah, it just wasn't working right from the get-go. So here she is trying to get her life back on track. And just when she's really kind of adjusting to this idea that maybe she'll always be alone, the chance to have the thing she most wants comes before her, but it's not a done deal. So Celia's journey is going to take her back to Charleston, South Carolina, a city I love, a city that everybody loves, I think. And of course, if you've been there, and I'm sure that most of you have, you're very aware that Charleston is and was and probably will continue to be at the forefront of the historic restoration movement. And so the title, The Restoration of Celia Fairchild, is kind of a play on words. Celia thinks she needs to be transformed into a different person. In fact, she simply needs to be restored into the person she was always intended to be. She is going to inherit a house from her departed, estranged Aunt Calpurnia, the one she named the column after. And when she gets back, she has the idea that she's simply going to sell that house in this hot real estate market, take the money so that she can build a life for herself and the child that she hopes she will be able to adopt in the future. Except there is a twist, of course. None of Celia's plans ever come about easily. And she finds out that Aunt Calpurnia had become a hoarder. This was something else that I really was interested in as I wrote this story. I had actually, before I actually started writing the story, or even really kind of got the idea that I wanted to write about Celia, I had been reading a book about hoarding. I don't have a hoarder in my family, although I have learned that probably about 10% of us do. But I was just interested in it. I'm always interested in like why people do the things they do. And I was fascinated to find out that hoarders don't necessarily hoard for the reasons I thought they did. I always believed it had something to do with a lack of abundance in childhood, and that these people, the only way they feel safe is to gather a lot of objects around them. And certainly there may be it, but one of the bigger reasons people do what they do is hoarders have a real difficulty making decisions about what to keep and what side. I think a lot of us struggle with that. I know just before my book tour, I went up to my office and I thought I was going to clean it up so that it would be tidy on my return. Yeah, for 3 hours I was up there and all I did was move the piles around. I didn't get rid of anything. Well, if you know hoarders are always cleaning out their stuff. They're always sorting through their stuffs, and yet it never gets any smaller because they simply cannot make a decision about what to keep and what to discard. I kind of thought that was a fascinating metaphor to be able to explore a little bit. Before I was writing full-time, one of my many careers, I worked in pastoral ministry to women. I did a lot of counseling in that time, and which meant mostly that I did a whole lot of listening, which was very enlightening. And in that period of counseling and listening, I really learned that I believe the thing that holds people back from being their best selves more than anything else is the inability to forgive, whether it be themselves or other people or fate or God or circumstances or whatever. And so we go through life and, we start out sort of perfect, and you see a baby and they are by and large, if they're healthy, they're generally happy and pretty adventurous and pretty creative and pretty curious and brave in a lot of ways. But as life goes on, we get dented and disappointed, betrayed. And so some of that happiness goes away and we stop being those people we were created to be. And what I have seen is that if we insist on holding on to every hurt, every betrayal, every bad memory, every tragedy, and stuff those in our backpack to carry with us, after a while, we are so weighed down that we cannot move forward at all. So that was a metaphor I brought into this book. As Celia is going through Aunt Calpurnia's things, she's also sorting through her own history. And she has to make some decisions about the things she is going to hold on to and the things she is going to let go. And it's a very, very difficult thing to do. And I'm just trying to find this one little part. It's a short little thing. And of course I should have marked it because that would have been so smart of me before. Well, anyway.
That wouldn't happen to be the quote from Heath about.
Yes, that is
Okay,
the
I
one.
wrote it
Do you
down
have
because I
that?
was gonna
Excellent.
ask you,
Jump
yes.
in. That's
Think
one of
of
my
the-
favorites.
Think of the house as a museum and you the curator. If a stranger walked through the door, what would you want them to know about your family?
That's
She
it.
makes a
Yeah.
decision about that. Yeah, I thought that was really a great point. The
And
house is really a character at that point in the
yes.
story.
Well, and I do think, we choose the objects in our homes because they do help tell our story, don't we? And so that's what she's trying to do. So that is really, I don't want to give away too much of the book, but a lot of my books explore themes of community, creativity, sisterhood, and this book is no exception. Celia's story is going to have a lot of twists and turns. And we will discover happiness isn't always the thing we think it is. But in fact, before the story ends, she will be transformed. She will be restored personally, spiritually, emotionally, creatively, in all kinds of ways. And so, though there will be things happen that neither I think the readers nor Celia can see coming, I will leave her in a good place, and I leave my readers in a good place. That's something I'm always very committed to.
Great. Well, thank you. I loved that first chapter that just gives so much insight to her right off the bat. It just tells so much. So we're going to have some questions and answers here. So I invite everybody to put their questions into the chat, and I'll get started with a few. This is the perk of this job. I get to talk to the authors and ask the questions first that I want to answer.
There you go.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed it. So a key thing pretty early in the book is she loses the column and is not able to write as Calpurnia anymore.
That is right.
And that's just has to be the kick in the gut of so many challenges she faces. And she's really found her identity in Calpurnia. And how does losing that identity as a columnist affect her, you think?
I think you hit upon something that, and by the way, bravo to you, Linda, because how many interviews have I done this, and very few people have picked up on that, which I think is really key in this story. She is in fact adrift. She's been Calpurnia for so long, and it's a persona that she sort of resents, as we see, but at the same time, she's clinging to it because it's kind of all she feels she has left in a way. So another line I really like from the book is like, this happens to her and she loses her job, and she is not allowed to write under that pen name anymore. It's this persona that she has assumed. And she talks about, she started out the day wanting to be transformed, and it happened. She walked in the door as Dear Calpurnia, and she walked out as Celia Fairchild, somebody who felt like somebody she used to know a long time ago, but had lost touch with. And in fact, she has lost touch with herself. And so that's what her journey really is about more than anything else.
Yes. And I found it interesting that she named herself as a columnist her aunt's an unusual name on top of that. What give us some insight on maybe why you felt like she would do that, take her aunt's name?
Because Calpurnia, her aunt Calpurnia, her mother was ill. Her own mother suffered from lupus and was quite ill for much of her childhood. And her father was a writer who was extremely self-absorbed. And her grandmother was a little older. And so really, in the ways that counted, Calpurnia became her mother. And so Calpurnia was the one who gave her advice, who lifted her up. And it wasn't that Calpurnia had particularly brilliant advice. It was kind of pretty commonsensical, a lot of it. And so when she originally started out as kind of a blogger, but people started writing questions to her, and being a polite girl from the South, of course, she wrote back and she answered. And when she didn't, and she was quite young, and so she didn't always know what all the answer was. So she would think, well, what could Calpurnia have said in that situation? So she was kind of tapping into her aunt's wisdom. So it makes sense that in fact, she ended up adopting that as her pen name. And she says in the book at some point, sometimes she just feels like she was channeling Calpurnia.
So neighbors, as typical in the South, nosy, kind of want to know what's going on.
Yes.
But also they become willing to help her. Tell us a little bit about some of her neighbors.
Yeah, I loved her. She has quite the collection of neighbors in her area. Some are people that she knew from childhood. My particular favorite, there's a character, Felicia, who is she was really one of my favorite of the secondary characters. She, I live in Oregon now, but I have lived in the South. I lived in Albany, Georgia for a while, and those were the first times I ever visited Charleston and Savannah, and of course fell in love with those beautiful cities. And and Felicia for me is a particular brand of Southern women that I met who were always so genuinely interested in other people and made you feel that you were probably far more interesting than was actually the case. And they gave you such confidence, and they were so wonderfully gracious and curious and outgoing in all the right ways. So I loved her. She has another neighbor that's new to the neighborhood. Her name's Happy, which is hilarious because this woman is anything but. She is really, really cranky, and I loved just sort of turning that around. And then Happy has a daughter named Pris, who is a fashion blogger, and she's in her like late teens, early 20s, and as mothers and daughters of that age will do, they certainly lock heads a lot of the time, but there's a story behind all that. And then she ends up running into, and she has another, Caroline, who lives across the street, who's new to the area. She is not from the South. She is adjusting. And she is married to Heath, who is a curator at one of the historical museums in Charleston. And then through a series of circumstances, she runs into an old friend, a friend who was very dear to her in childhood and who they'd had a falling out as time went on. And so they are reconnecting, and her name is Polly. So there's, I am kind of known for having an ensemble cast of characters. I really love doing that. I love making sure each character has his or her own story arc within the story. I just think it adds a richness to it. So there's a lot going on in that neighborhood.
Oh, definitely makes it really fun. So I have lots of questions, but I know some of you have questions you would like to ask too. So just put them in the chat. In the meantime, I'll keep going.
And you know what, Linda, at some point,
we have about 5-10 more minutes.
Oh, okay, good. Okay, because my battery doesn't seem to be. I should be plugged in, and it seems to be draining my battery. But we're okay for right now. So okay. If I have to move into another plug at some point, and you see me move, that's why I'm doing it.
Yeah. So she has this other friend, Calvin.
Yes.
Who is with her in New York, and they are very tight friends.
Mm-hmm.
He really takes the journey with her, doesn't he?
Yes, he does. It's her best friend. And, I almost never do this. I very rarely model. In fact, in 19 books, I can think of 3 times that I have modeled a character on someone I actually know. But Calvin, in fact, is modeled after my very best friend, Mark. And so, Mark is different than Calvin in a lot of ways, but for me, those were the most fun parts of the book to write, because not the content themselves, but sort of the cadence and the affection and the ping pong back and forth of those conversations are just very much like my conversations with my buddy Mark. So that was fun.
Yeah, he was such a help to her. She really wants this baby that the attorney had called her about, but she will have to go through home visit and things to be selected. She's one out of
3 families
who want to, and finds herself in difficult circumstances. How is Calvin key to her navigating that journey?
I think Calvin is, Calvin really loves her in a friendship kind of a way, and that is so genuine. He is somebody who gives her courage when she's just about out of it. And he is the kind of friend who is willing to possibly give up things he wants because he wants to see her happy. That's his primary motivation in this relationship. He just wants to see her happy. And so even though he will really, really miss her, he's the one who says, I think you need to stay here in Charleston, even though he would, if he had his druthers, he would prefer that she come back to New York. But he knows that this is her best chance for happiness, and he's willing to do that. So he's like, I take friendship very seriously. I know a lot of people, I have a lot of acquaintances. I had a lot of small F friends, but the big F friends to me are people for whom, if they called me in the middle of the night and said, I need you, I would get up and I would go. You cannot have that many relationships like that in your life. You can only have a handful. And Calvin is one of Celia's handful.
Everybody should have a Calvin.
Yes, they should.
Definitely. Well, I love this quote as well. And it made me think, I never really thought about this before, but she's talking about how current friends are a connection to the past and current life now, but new friends are a bridge to the future.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
she is meeting so many new friends. How are they affecting her future?
Well, I mean, I think the new friends are also part of, helping spur her forward to get what she wants, to be a little braver. But I have to say, Celia is receiving a lot, but she's also giving a lot too. And I like that. It is friendship is a circle. We there are times when we are the ones who need help, and there are times when we're the ones who give help. And so Celia is meeting Trey, who is an attorney who is kind of trying to help her navigate this whole business of being able to do all the legal stuff that's involved when you're restoring a house, especially in a city where there's a lot of rules about historic restoration, things like that, and helping her through this adoption. And then he's got a brother who's actually doing some of the work, but his brother Lorne is somebody who he needs a second chance, and Celia's the one who's willing to give him that. So those new friendships are very important for going both.
We lost you. Say that again.
Oh, I said those new friendships I think are very important, but it goes both ways.
Mm-hmm. So she really becomes a different person in Charleston. She had so many challenges and disappointments.
Yes, she did.
How was she different in Charleston than she had been in New York?
Ooh, I'm going to have to move this computer
Okay.
as I'm talking to you. So I'm walking and talking. That is a really good question. I would say, for one thing, I think when she's in Charleston, she's more, I think she's more vulnerable in a lot of ways, right? I mean, she had really, she was popular, she was successful, she had all the finances she probably needed, and she I'm sure she had a circle of friends. She had kind of, hang on one second. Really, I'll be back, I promise. Let's see if that helps.
I'm going to start tap dancing.
There we go. Okay, I think we got it. Hopefully it's going to work now. She was, she was just thrust into the deep end of the pool in a lot of ways, and she had to make a whole new life for herself. And I think those times are very difficult. I have moved so many times in my life. I have had, I've been married for, I don't know, 300 years, I think. And I've had more than 20 addresses in 8 different states.
Wow.
And it's always terrifying to have to start over, but it's also, every single time, it is a chance to reinvent yourself a little bit, to sort out what you really want out of life, and figure out how to be a better version of yourself. So I think she has that opportunity, and I think because she's forced to, but also because of her friends, she makes that transition pretty well.
Right. Well, Celia was an awesome character, and I really enjoyed the book, and it was very uplifting. And
Thank you.
Yeah, it's springtime. We want uplifting books, I think. After so long of having some difficult times and dark winter, and yeah, it was really great.
Well, I've had a lot of people tell me that they feel like this is the perfect book for right now. So I could too.
Cindy asked if there's a chance for a sequel.
Well,
Celia?
my feeling about sequels is that publishers are always happy to write a sequel from a book that sells well. If Celia sells enough copies, I'm sure my editor would be like first in line to want a sequel. I honestly, I loved this character so much. I feel like she is somebody that I would love to revisit this cast of characters. So I certainly hope I have that opportunity.
So what are you working on now?
I am just about 3 weeks out from finishing the draft of my next book. I don't like to really talk about my books too much before they're out, but I think it's got a great title. It's called Esme Cahill Fails Spectacularly.
Ah, interesting. Yeah. That makes you want to pick it up, open it.
Well, I hope so. And I think failure is failure, what it is, what it isn't, why we fear it, why we dread it so much, I think is something that's definitely worth talking about and reading about.
Well, Marie, it was wonderful to have you. Thank you for sharing Celia with us and your talent. We thank you so much for being on with Southward.
It was a joy to be here, and continued good luck to you in this fine work you're doing in Chattanooga.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Great. So well done.
Yeah,
you.
so everyone, next month on May 13th, we have Karen White. We've had her several years ago, and she has a new book, The Last Night in London. So she'll be.
I have read that book, and you're all going to love it.
Yeah.
Tune in.
And then we will have our fundraiser Focus Lit June 1st, and featured in that is Jill McCorkle. And she is going to be interviewed by another great author, Lee Smith, both great Southern authors. So keep those on your calendar. Thanks, everyone. I hope everyone has a great night. Take care.
Thanks, Linda. Bye-bye.